Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. The structure of this event will first be an introduction, then a talk from our author, and lastly, we'll have time to take questions or take comments. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to type in your concern in the chat box. I can assist you there. And to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you or type it into the chat or Q&A box and we will address them at the appropriate time. Patricia says, greetings all, happy to be here this evening from Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. Thanks, Patricia, for being here. Let me introduce you guys to our author. Holly Harrison is the author of the debut novel, Rights and Wrongs. She has been a writer all her life. As a youngster, she wrote books in her head as she walked to the bus stop, and at night she whispered made-up stories to her sister after the lights were out. She came to New Mexico to attend graduate school, but soon became enamored with the land and people. Now retired from university, she devotes herself full-time to writing mystery novels. Harrison finds the Land of Enchantment provides a multicultural landscape to unfold crimes and misdemeanors. She lives near Old Town Albuquerque with her husband Phil and two Scottish Terriers. When Harrison is not writing, she is writing her Swedish warm blood, Soleil, in the Bosque by the Rio Grande. Please welcome author Holly Harrison and her new book titled Rights and Wrongs.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you everyone for joining in today. I realize that many of us have spent over a year on Zoom for our work, meeting with family and friends, taking yoga, getting instruction, and we're all sort of reaching our limits. So I really appreciate you be willing for once again tuning in and joining me today to talk about my book, Rights and Wrongs. If you haven't read the book, I hope to entice you to do so. And if you have, I hope to share some information about the characters and the locale, especially, that might be of interest. When I wrote my book and knew that it was finally going to get published, it was before the pandemic, and I imagined doing my book talk at the local bookstore and with a few friends that I coerced to join in and listen to me. But things changed, the pandemic hit, and everything went online. So here we are. And writing a book, here's my book, Rights and Wrongs, you're probably going to see it backwards, isn't easy. But the real work comes in editing, rewriting, editing, not to mention looking for a publisher. And as I said before, the pandemic hit right before I found a publisher, and everything came to a halt. The publishing world almost stopped. And as you know, bookstores closed, libraries closed, publishing dates got put back, everything slowed. And so I was really thrilled to be able to get my book out in January 2021. Rights and Wrongs is part of a mystery series, part of a 3-part mystery series featuring Pascal Ruiz, a Santa Fe detective, and his friend, Gillian Jasper. And I want to note that Gillian is pronounced with a hard G because she is named after her Scottish grandmother. And Scotland is the only English-speaking country that uses the hard G for that name. So many of you, when you read it, will be thinking Jillian, but it's Gillian. But if you want to say Jillian, that's fine. Anyway, I wanted to title the book Tonki after the pueblo that is featured in the book. but my publisher thought it really wouldn't resonate, and he suggested titling it. He suggested several titles, and I chose Rights and Wrongs. I thought it was catchy, and also it spoke to the religious aspects featured in the story. I'd like to read you the prologue of the book that describes a penitente reenactment around the early 1900s. I'm suffering from allergies, so I'm sorry about how nasal I am. I'm nasal anyway, but it's worse. At the beginning of the 19th century, a young boy was sent to look for a sheep that had strayed from the herd near the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. As he rounded the bend, he saw a group of men. One of them, dressed in a white robe, struggled as he carried a huge cross on his back. The other men marched behind, lashing their backs with yucca stalks and cactus whips. They stopped periodically, murmuring prayers. The boy watched the ceremony, mesmerized. The group came to a stop, secured the robed man's hands and feet to the cross, and hoisted him up just as the clouds parted. Now, growing up in the East Coast, I never had heard of the Penitentes before coming to New Mexico. And although I'm not a particularly religious person, I was intrigued by this group's devotion to God and also their commitment to their community. There is a lot of lore surrounding this lay Catholic group, and a lot of disapproval of some of their practices, even the reenactment, walking the Stations of the Cross during the Easter season, the flagellation and whipping themselves as penitents, but not all of them do it. And in my research, I really found out a lot about why and how this group came about. And I wanted to present that in the book and try and dispel some of the stereotypes and feelings around this group. If you've read the book, you probably are familiar with the story. I feel like I am. Anyway, if you haven't read the book, I just wanted to give you the beginning of it. The detective, Pascal Ruiz, is involved with a case that's a burglary at the Santa Fe Opera Grounds. And someone has broken into the storage unit that houses the leftover clothes, costumes, and props from the opera. And every year, those of you, probably many of you know that they have a sale of these. And so you can go and you can buy some of the props or costumes and things. And I actually went to it before the pandemic, and it was quite an experience. The line, if you ever want to go, get there at the crack of dawn, because the line is huge and it took hours to get in there. And by the time I got in there, I just wanted to get out and leave. I didn't buy anything. Anyway, that's a little aside. But Ruiz is not really happy about this case. It's not very exciting. And then the captain asks him to look into the disappearance of his niece's boyfriend off the record. And the niece and her boyfriend have been staying out at Diamond Tail Ranch south of Santa Fe. And she's an actress and or wannabe actress and working on a TV Western. And he is writing an article on the Penitentes and the procession to Chimayó. Ruiz, looking for Pilot, sets in a series of events that culminates in him stepping over the line and putting his job in jeopardy. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot, because if you haven't read it, I don't want to, spoiler alert. Anyway, the book takes place in the spring, and the weather in New Mexico, as all of you know, witnessed the last couple of days. I think Sunday it was 80, Monday 70s, today the high 50s and rain. And you know, you can have one day sunny and warm, the next day a snowstorm. But one thing we can always be sure of in New Mexico in the spring is the wind. And so I wanted to read you a little section of Pascal wakes up on a Sunday morning, and he could hear the branches of the lilac bush outside his window scratching the screen, and knew the wind was still blowing. It would be the second day of a 40-mile-an-hour winds. The wind made him cranky. But he wasn't alone. Santa Fe seemed to be on edge. Basic courtesies seemed non-existent. When possible, people stayed indoors, and if they had to venture out, they kept their heads down. His friend, Gillian, seemed oblivious to the wind. But this was her first New Mexico spring, and she was from the East Coast, where hurricanes blew off the Atlantic. When Pascal had first griped about the wind, Gillian had ruffled his hair and laughed. Now, when he mentioned anything about the weather, she would burst into the old Kingston Trio song. They call the wind Mariah. Away out here, they've got a name for rain and wind and fire. The rain is Tess, the fire's Joe, and they call the wind Mariah. Pascal hated the winds. He suffered them most his life, but each spring he swore it would be his last. The winds clogged his head and dried his nose until it bled. His lips cracked painfully no matter how much balm he used. His eyes stung as if packed with tiny particles of glass. Anyway, we've had a lot of wind lately. The story also takes place during Holy Week, and that's the week between Palm Sunday and Easter. And this allowed me to bring in, you know, the religious aspects of the procession to Chimayó and the reenactments by the Penitentes. It also provided a condensed time frame in which to have a crime and solve it. I also wanted to include something about the Chimayó Chapel and the healing dirt, because that's very special to New Mexico. And so Pilot, before he goes missing, he remembers, recalls his 15th birthday when his father wakes him up to go to Chimayó and get healing dirt because his mother is very sick and possibly dying. And so I wanted to read you the little section on Chimayó. And so they go to the chapel, and you know, he has to go in and light candles and say a prayer and everything, and you know, give some offering to the box. And then his father rose and steered him toward the back door. The entryway was low, supported by a heavy beam. They had to duck their heads. El Pocito, the pit, took up most of the room, so they had to skirt their way around the periphery. Bobby stared down at the pit, filled with the holy dirt, allegedly capable of both spiritual and physical healing. He was a realist and had his doubts about the dirt's power. And how did the pit magically replenish itself? It was always full, never ran out of dirt. He was sure someone, probably the janitor, brought the dirt from the surrounding hillsides each night when no one was around. He was surprised that his father, usually a pragmatic man, insisted that the dirt was blessed and possessed special powers. Gently, his father pushed him toward the pit. The room was airless and oppressive and smelled of sickness. A wave of claustrophobia enveloped him, and he had to use his sleeve to wipe the perspiration that dripped off his brow. Bobby stared at the thick adobe walls, covered floor to ceiling with discarded implements, crutches, canes, braces, walkers. A wheelchair was shoved into the corner, abandoned. The entire wall was plastered with messages of thanks from the cured, taped haphazardly among the assisted devices. The room was intended to project a sense of miraculous. The discarded equipment no longer needed and left behind. As he scanned the walls, his stomach flip-flopped and left an acrid taste in his mouth. For a moment, he thought he would be sick. His father, impatient, shook his shoulder, placed a small felt sack in his hand, and motioned for Bobby to fill it with the holy dirt. Bobby had little faith that this would save his mother, but wasn't about to pass up any chance. So, although the story moves around quite a bit, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Los Alamos, most of the action takes place south of Santa Fe in an area that I want to show some slides of, hopefully, if I can get it to work. Okay, so this here is a map, and it's the same map that if you have the book, it's in the front of the book. And so this is the area that is south of Santa Fe. And it's bordered, you know, on the north on Santa Fe, and the south, the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. But most of the action takes place around here in Diamond Tail Ranch, which is an expansive ranch that has a lot of the area. And it's bordered here by the San Felipe Black Mesa Casino that's off I-25, and then south of Golden off of Route 14, the Portocito Road. So, and here is the pueblo, Tonke Pueblo. But the Diamond Tail Ranch was a big working cattle ranch. There are no longer any cattle there, but there are some wild horses, and they do shoot some movies at the ranch house and in this area from time to time. The Tonke Pueblo here, and I'll show some pictures of that, is part of the San Felipe Reservation, and it's a pre-Columbian 14th to 16th century pueblo. It was occupied, and it has very rich clay, and at one time it was produced most of the clay, most of the pottery and glazed pottery along the Rio Grande Valley. The only other thing I want to point out, well, let me go on to the next one. This is a picture looking out towards Tonke out here, the pueblo. And there are some ruins of the pueblo, but there aren't many. And I was very lucky to have this book that my husband had that was a report of partial excavation of the ancient Pueblo 4 Indian ruin in New Mexico. And it's really an extensive book that of what was there, and the pottery and the petroglyphs. And so that was a really nice resource. In addition, my husband and I, in the late 70s and 80s, went out to Tonke, and we had permission from the foreman at Diamond Tail to take students out and dig clay. And so this area was very special. And when we dug clay, we made these little pinch pots, really small from the clay. And then we did pit firing, which is sort of a reduction process where you put them in the pit and you put manure on top, and the reduction process creates this beautiful black shiny pottery. Yeah, totally. So also out there, these, and I, excuse me for these slides were taken in the 80s, and they were taken by real film, black and white film that we developed ourselves. And so they aren't the greatest photographs, but it's a nice sort of memory of the place. And here are two petroglyphs that are etched into the wall of the canyon. And there are thousands of petroglyphs, and most of them are on this ceremonial rock that is really difficult to get to. But there's all kinds of images of birds and animals, reptiles, geometric shapes and stuff. So I feel very, very blessed that, you know, I have this picture and saw the petroglyphs there. Also on the ranch property, there on the Diamond Tail Ranch property are two ghost towns, the Coyote and Hagen. Coyote, there is really nothing left of it, you know, maybe a broken down fence with a couple of boards. But Hagen, which was a town that was built in the early 1900s, and it was meant to house about 500 Italian and Slavic coal miners. And for about 30 years, it operated, and they even had a railroad that came in to pick up the coal. But about 30 years later, they hit a layer of shale, and so everything closed down and it became a ghost town. But it was a quite elaborate town, you know, it had a big dance hall and it had buildings, and this is a picture of what's remaining now. And I wanted to read you one last section, and this is about Hagen. When Pascal Ruiz goes to look for Bobby, he interviews the girlfriend, and then he and Gillian drive out to Hagen, or over to Hagen, to see whether they, you know, Bobby might have been over there, because he was supposed to go over there to take some pictures. So they go looking for him over there. Pascal could see the ruins of Hagen in the distance and decided to take a shortcut through the brush. But when he pulled his Jeep off the road, his tires sank into a gully. As he tried to maneuver the Jeep out, he hoped the scrapes and thuds were superficial and wouldn't damage the undercarriage. He gave the gas pedal one more push and the Jeep leaped out of the ditch. He swerved to the right to miss a good-sized mesquite bush, but his tire hit a hefty piece of alabaster and brought the vehicle to a halt. "I think we better walk from here." "You think?" Gillian said in her best Southern twang. As Pascal opened the door, he looked over at Gillian. "It's a little early for rattlers, but watch your step." Gillian picked up Bertie. That's the dog. They took the dog out there with them. Swiveled around toward the door and carefully set her feet on the ground. "Rattlers?" "Put the dog down. She'll alert us if one is nearby. Anyway, snakes won't bother you unless you are the third, unless you step on them." "I feel so relieved." Gillian started to think the outing wasn't much fun. She was tired of bumping along the road. Now she had to trudge through brush, avoid stickers, burrs, rattlesnake bites, to some ghost town. She was cranky. Where was the picnic she had envisioned? In some scenic locale, maybe near a stream, with an abundance of wildflowers and soft grass for blankets she'd brought. No worries. There are only two of us. You don't want to be the third on a hike. Gillian detected Pascal's sadistic glee as he continued with the snake lore. The first person wakes the snake. The second makes it mad. That's you. And the third gets bit. The last thing Gillian wanted to do was make a snake mad, and there was no one behind her to sacrifice. She lowered Bertie to the ground. Instantly, the terrier lunged forward and the leash slipped out of her hand. So you can see Gillian is not really, she's a city girl and she's not really used to being out here in the wilderness with all these things going on. This is a picture of the Tonky brick factory. A brick factory was built about 1912 right next to the pueblo and made use of the wonderful rich clay that was very tempered and could make really not only pottery but bricks. And it continued to produce bricks and tiles for about 30 years. And I actually have a brick that I found out at Tonky in the 1980s. And you can see it has the word Tonky in it. And it's a very big, hefty brick. So that's a great souvenir for me. This area was very special, and I really have fond memories of being out there. Unfortunately, now you can't really get down to, even though Hagen Road is a county road, it is blocked at the right east of the casino, and it is blocked right where La Madera Road goes into Hagen Road. You can't really go any further east. So the ranch is really off limits. But one thing out there, this is a view from the Golden Open Space, and this is the North Trail. There are two trails in the open space right off La Madera, at the end of La Madera Road, right before it goes into Hagen. And this is a picture I took from the North Trail, looking out into that area where the ranch is and Tonky is. So that is the only thing that you can really see now. Okay, I'm back here. Okay, well, that is pretty much my presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions, but I have a friend that didn't feel comfortable putting a question in the chat, and so she sent it to me, and so I have to ask it. And this person was very generous with her time and helped edit the book. So her question is, before we start the general questions, I noticed Pascal is and remains your main character. Did you consider Gillian as your main character at any point? And no, I didn't. I really didn't. You know, I feel like Gillian is going to be a character somehow, but she gets preempted in the next book too by somebody else. She's still in the book, but she's sort of still in the periphery. So, and I know my friend really likes Gillian and wants her to be the main character, and maybe she will be someday. Anyway, thank you. Okay, Jessica.
Thank you, Holly. So I think you just mentioned next book. How many more books in this? Is this a series then?
Yes, the first book I wrote, I didn't get published, and it was called Ghost Notes. And I just sort of gave up on, I struggled, you know, sent out millions of, no, I didn't send out millions, but I sent out queries and tried to get it published. And I really wasn't able to, so I just started writing the second book, and that's the one that got published. But the first book, Ghost Notes, is about it takes place with Pascal Ruiz, gets assigned a case. There's been a stolen Stradivarius violin. Someone is attacked, and after he performed, and the violin is stolen. And that's Gillian has actually gone to Santa Fe to interview this. She's a violinist, so she's gone to Santa Fe to interview this violinist. So she meets Pascal, so that's how they meet. And the third book, I've just finished the draft and are editing its new territory. And if you've read this book, you know that Pascal is in trouble. And so that's all I'm going to say, but it continues with Pascal and Gillian, and also some other characters are brought in.
Very cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have you always wanted to write mysteries?
You know, I didn't really start to write mysteries. I don't know. I mean, I think I like that format. I think the format really allows you to, you know, develop characters and put them in different situations, and then figure out how you're going to get them out of that situation. It is a easy, in some ways, it's an easy way to formulate a story, versus just like literary fiction. It's a little more challenging. I'd love to do that, and maybe I'll challenge myself someday.
Yeah, it sounds like you do a lot of research, and you've been to these sites. What is your writing practice like?
Well, I'm not one of those people that writes 8 hours a day, but in the winter, because, you know, I have a horse, and I like riding my horse. So in the winter, I ride my horse in the morning and I write in the afternoon. And in the summer, when it's hot, I ride in the morning and write in the afternoon. I hope I said that right, depending on the weather. But yeah, I like to do a lot of research. I think research is, you know, to me, it's interesting, is learning new things, and I want to base things on research. It was sort of disappointing not being able to actually go out. You know, we got stopped at the roadblock and really couldn't go back to the ranch or look at the pueblo or anything like we used to be able to, but had a feeling for the area. And my publisher was, you know, he seemed to know the area, and he kept telling me I had the ghost towns in the wrong place. And so I finally just said, okay, wherever they go, they go. You know? But there's so much online now that you can find, and books you can get out of the library. And so.
Yeah, but you get a better feel when you're actually in the space. That's so cool that you have all those photographs you took, and clay, and that awesome brick. That's
yeah, I love that brick.
I do too. It's wonderful.
I can't believe I've kept it all these years.
Yes, good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have a couple questions in the Q&A. First question is, will there be an audio version or a digital version of your book?
Well, there is a digital version. It's available on Amazon as an ebook. Is that what you mean by a digital version? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it is available as an ebook. Yeah, I would love to have an audio book. That's a little more challenging, because, you know, you have to hire someone to record it, and it has to be in a studio, and I certainly don't have the voice to do that, but I might look into that. I think it would be good. And some people have suggested, oh, it'd be a good movie or TV series, like like Longmire or something.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So if anyone has any connections, let me know.
Wendy asks, how did you develop the character of Pasquale Ruiz?
Well, he was really developed a lot in the first book. And, you know, the problem with writing a series is, you know, you have one, you know, you've written a lot about your characters and you're hoping that you are getting across more about the character in the second book without being monotonous, in case people have read the first book. But yeah, he was, I like that his father is Hispanic and he taught at the Espanola Community College. He was a wrestling coach. And his mother was Italian, and her family all came over. And I think I described this in the first book, and I'm not sure I really described it in the second. But out in Raton, when they had a lot of Italian immigrants coming in to work in the mines out there. So I sort of liked that he had this kind of dual, you know, parentage. And then in the first book, it was sort of funny because he decided that he really wanted to be French, and so he would always speak French at the table and really irritate his father. And then he ended up going to the Sorbonne in France. So he's a very strange character. You know, I've just sort of felt like he was a person that he wanted to be a writer, but he really didn't have the perseverance. And then his father sort of got him this job as a detective, or his uncle or something. And so he's sort of in this position. You know, I sort of like characters that are put into positions where they, you know, they're really not meant to be in those positions, but somehow they manage and muddle through. It's sort of like, I feel like I'm writing about myself, because that's how I've always feel about my life. I'm always in these, what am I doing in these positions? You know? Anyway, I hope I answered that question.
You did. That's awesome. Linnea, you have your hand raised, so I'll allow you to talk if you'd like.
Yes.
Yeah, hi.
Let's see.
Hi,
Okay.
Linnea. Oh, she's
Hi. I wanted to know, when you picked up that book, did you have any idea that you were going to write a story or a novel set in that area?
No idea whatsoever. You know, we just, you know, I spent a lot of time out at Tonki, and I found that brick, and it's just amazing I still have it. That was from the 1980s, you know. And also my husband Phil and I, we even spent a night out there. We had gone out there and we just decided, let's just camp out here on the ground.
Wow.
It was just, you know, luckily we weren't trampled by the cows or bit by rattlesnakes, but it was just really sort of a magical area. Yeah, I don't know why I had no intention of ever, I think at that point, even writing.
Did you have feelings about the area, whether that there was something almost supernatural, that there were almost ghosts around there, things like that?
Yes, I thought it was a very magical area. I mean, it was, and especially, you know, I hadn't been in New Mexico for very long, and coming from the Washington, D.C. area, which is like, you know, I grew up in the suburbs that was like minus culture. You know, we didn't have, it just was so amazing. I mean, New Mexico was just so amazing to me. It really is the land of enchantment, and it is just such a special place. And I think so many people, you know, really don't know about it. And that's good, because we don't want to have too many people here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Linnea.
So let's see. What authors inspire you?
Oh, one of my favorite authors right now is Ann Patchett. I loved her last book. I love all her books, and you know, she doesn't write mysteries, but she writes things that are very close to my heart, and I feel like sometimes she's writing about my life. And I also like Louise Penny, and um, I love Patti Smith, David Sedaris. You know, I love the humor, David Sedaris's humor. But yeah, I do read a lot of mysteries. So
Very cool. All great authors.
yeah.
Yeah. What do you hope that people take away from reading your books?
Well, I hope they get enjoyment, number one. I hope it's entertaining and interesting. I hope they learn a little bit about this special area. And I hope they care about the characters, you know, because I feel like these characters are very special to me. And, you know, they're struggling and trying to figure things out. So I hope, I mean, I have had people say, well, what's going to happen to so and so? And I'm like, I don't know. You have to wait for the next book. You know? So I hope that's what I hope people get out of it.
Do you ever surprise yourself with when you're writing? Like when you discover what does happen next?
Yes, I do, because sometimes they do sort of take off on their own. I know people say, oh, you should never say that. Your characters don't really do that. But I do feel like they do. I mean, I surprise myself that I write this stuff. I mean, I don't know. It's surprising, but it's really fun. I love writing. Editing, not. Looking for publishers, not, but writing is very
Yes,
fun.
the art part.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your book and your practice and your journey and your photos and your brick. Everything's so cool. If there any other questions, feel free to raise your hand now or write it. But really appreciate you presenting with us, Holly. And I can't wait to read Rights and Wrongs and think about all the locations you described.
Yes, well, I really appreciate the Santa Fe Library. I love libraries. It was devastating when the libraries closed during the pandemic, and it was so wonderful when they opened again because you know, I get a lot of books from the library. I try and buy a few books because I feel guilty about the bookstores, but I love the library and it's such a great resource. So it is really an honor to be able to share my book with the Santa Fe Library and people out there. So I want to thank everybody.
Yeah, and thank you all for joining us. And check out Holly's website, hollyharrisonwriter.com. You can find all the information about her and her books and how to purchase them. And check out Santa Fe Public Library's calendar for more of our upcoming events. Stay safe, read books, read Rights and Wrongs, and everyone have a great night. Thank you so much. A million times thank you, Holly.
Oh, thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.